Good morning. My name is James Roberts, in case you forgot who I was. I was out with COVID for a few weeks, and I'm so glad that staff did a great job of covering for me, and then had Michael Thigpen booked for quite a while. And so, by the way, Michael, when he and I were out at lunch last week, Michael and I become pretty good friends, and he said, James, if I ever move back to this area, I want to be on this staff. And I just thank you for the way you treat him when he's here, and he just feels really loved on by you. And it makes me very proud to be your pastor when I hear that from another pastor. Well, today we are walking into the third week of our Flawed Hero of Faith series. And basically, we're looking at the heroes of faith from Hebrews chapter 11, and then we're saying, whoa, these guys are pretty awesome. But they also did some pretty messed up things. And I don't know about you, but I relate to people who blow it. I relate to the non-perfect people out there in the world. And so we want to just look at that, but also see how God works in the midst of that. So can we just pray and prepare our hearts to receive God's word today? God, we love you so much, and we thank you for the opportunity to dive into your word. Be with us today. Lead us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, have you ever wanted something so bad that you were willing to do whatever it took to get it? You're willing to do anything to get it. When I was in high school, particularly around my sophomore, junior year, the coolest car that a teenager could have had was a black-on-black Mustang GT 5.0 convertible. I mean, it was in the Aerosmith videos. It was also in a Clueless movie. Not that I watched that, but it was the car. And for some reason, and I'm very embarrassed to say this, but in my, and maybe because of the insecurity of growing up poor and all these things, and I just thought, you know what, this car will set me apart. This will say that I'm somebody. This will say, hey, I got something going on. Like, hey, look at me, check this out. There's something here. And when you're a teenager, you just have these weird thoughts. Like, you know, if I get this one jacket, all of a sudden I'm super cool. You know, you just think those things. Well, I thought this car would make me the absolute coolest person in the school, which I didn't need much help. But anyways, but let me tell you something. The passion to be set apart and to be somebody drove me to do some things I was ashamed of. I stole a lot of money. My family worked at festivals through their business, and I would often work for other vendors, and I would rob these wonderful people blind. I stole money from wherever I can get it. I would take that money, I would purchase drugs, and then I would have those drugs sold through several of my friends. And then I worked a lot of hours as a waiter. And by the time I was 17 years old, I bought that car. And, you know, and let me tell you something. I did a lot of evil things to get that car, but it was still awesome. I don't care. It was still an awesome car. And everybody wanted to ride with me. And I was like the neighborhood limousine. And on a scale of hotness, 1 to 10, I was like a 3. But when I was in a car, I was like a 5, which is pretty good for a redheaded, freckle-faced guy. We'll take it, all the help we can get. And so, you know, I got the car, and I thought I was awesome. A couple months after I got the car, I was at Kings Island with my friend Eddie, and it started raining real bad, so we went out to the car to hang out there, and we decided to have an herbal experience while we were hanging out waiting for the rain to pass over. And while we were out there having our herbal experience, my alarm started going off on my car, and we couldn't get it to turn off. And so the Kings Island cops were coming over, and I don't know if you know anything about the Kings Island cops, but they're the baddest men on this earth. And the Kings Island cops were coming by, and so I decided to take my herbal stash and put it in a tape deck. Do you guys remember those? I think they were made in the 1800s. And so I put my herbal stash into the tape deck. Cops go away, and then Eddie, for some reason, throws a tape into the tape deck, and now I have my herbal stash stuck in there, and we can't get the tape out. We can't get the herbal stash out, and now every time I go off to Bible college, and because I got saved a few months after this, and now this car looks ridiculous because I know what that car represented. That car represented all the sinful things I did just to have an image, to be somebody, to set myself apart. Now I'm at Bible college, and the street going to my Bible college has 3 speed bumps because, you know, teenagers. And every time I hit the bump, the tape would hit, but it played only the same part of the song. And so I'm driving and it would hit, and the next thing you would hear is, wake up, it's the first of the month, wake up. Anybody who remembers that song? If you don't, you weren't a gangster like me. And it was just like this ridiculous reminder of everything I did just to try to set myself apart, to be a somebody. Don't we do that? How many hours have we spent in our life in junior high or high school or college or as adults doing things to set ourselves aside? Maybe it's the career. If I just get this promotion, or if I just become this much, this successful, then I'll be set apart. Or if my house will look like this, that will set me apart. Or if I have these achievements in my career, I will be set apart. I will be a somebody. I will have a name. A lot of us, we work very hard on our body image because we're like, man, you know what? If I'm hot, everybody will notice, and that will set me apart. That will make me a somebody. And a lot of people, the way they dress, and we do, there's something in this world motivates us to chase and chase and chase after these things that will set us apart, that will say to the world, yo, look at me. I'm somebody. We're going to be looking today at Moses. And Moses, because of some unresolved issues, and that's the thing I noticed that after I came to Christ, when I looked at my car and I thought about how ridiculous it was, everything I did to chase after that, because I knew what my car really represented. My car represented some unresolved issues from my childhood of where I was very insecure, and I was using that to prop my life up and cover up my insecurity. Well, now we're going to look at Moses, who has some deep insecurities and some unresolved issues from his childhood. And so he did some things to try to cover that up and make a name for himself. Here's how we're going to do this today. We're going to look through 3 periods of Moses' life. Moses lived to be 120 years old. And so we're going to look at 40, 40, and 40. And these are 3 distinct seasons of his life. So let's look at the very first season of Moses' life. Season number 1 of Moses' life. He spent the first 40 years of his life in Egypt trying to become a somebody. First 40 years, first season of his life, he's trying to become a somebody. Let's check out his first step out into adulthood. And here's his coming out party. Let's check this out. Verse 11. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were. Let's talk about that for a second. His own people were the Hebrew people, but remember, Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, so he grew up as an Egyptian, but his people were enslaved. And he said that, it says here that he watched them at their hard labor. Then, he didn't like this. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And then check this out. We'll get to this a little bit later. Looking this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and then hid him in the sand. Now, this is not the way Moses' life, his adult life, was supposed to start out. And here's what I want to do, okay, just to help us out. Who in here has heard Moses' story? Raise your hand. All right, I figure so. So here's what I'm going to do today. I want you to hang with me. Will you guys agree to hang with me for a few moments? Because I'm going to do something different today. What I'm going to give you is, I'm going to give you the traditional view of how we in Christendom have looked at Moses' life over the last 2 years. And then I want to take what we understand today about human psychology and all these things. And then I want to flip Moses' story upside down. And maybe we'll look at Moses' life in a much different way. So I need you to really pay attention to the first part, even though you know these things, just so we can understand the second part. You guys with me? All right, let's do this. Here we go. Let's talk about Moses. Here's what we know about Moses. He's the miracle baby. Pharaoh ordered that all the Egyptian children would be killed because they were growing too big and he thought they had too much influence. So his mom put him basically, they say something like nice, like a reed basket or whatever. Really, it was a coffin. The mom put him in a coffin in the Nile because that's what they were putting the babies in after the babies were killed. And so they tried to hide him in a coffin and got stuck in the reed bushes. And just so happened that Pharaoh's daughter discovers this baby, and Pharaoh's daughter says, I'm going to take this child. But God does something incredible. Pharaoh's daughter then asked Moses' family to raise him. And so Moses goes back and spends many years learning all about the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew religion, and being loved on by his mom and dad and his sister. This is a story. We're like, wow, what a miracle. Look at the sovereignty of God. And then he got to be a part of this lifestyle that's insane. The only way for us to compare it is imagine a kid who's abandoned on the streets in Calcutta, India, all of a sudden being swept up by a jet, sent all the way over to England, and now it's like, hey, you live with the royal family. He probably didn't have just a room. He probably had a suite of rooms. He would have been incredibly educated in astronomy, biology, in mathematics, and he would have been overly educated. He probably went to the Temple of the Sun, which according to historians are saying like that's basically the ancient Cambridge of that time. Matter of fact, what does the Bible say in Acts 7:22? It says Moses was educated in all the learning of the Egyptians. And also, not only did he learn, but he's a pretty intelligent person. He got it. And it goes on to say that he was also mighty in words and deeds. And so he was making a name for himself. He had Egyptian respect. He possessed power and influence as Pharaoh's daughter's son. And this is fascinating. By the time he reached 30, we have some extra biblical historians who tell us that Moses actually led the Egyptians into a battle and they beat the Ethiopians, so he would have been a decorated general. Okay, let's just break it down. Moses was the man. He was the man at this point. He was the prize of Egypt. He was set up for the throne. And here's what I love about Moses. He also had an incredible heart. His heart broke for the oppressed because even though he grew up in the palace, his heart broke for his Hebrew brothers and sisters who were oppressed and in slavery. And then Moses one day, and this is one of the big reasons why he's in the Hall of Faith. He sees all that he has. His life is set up for nothing but luxury and power and no accountability. I mean, he had it all set up. But then he felt a deep calling back to his own people. This is the incredible person that Moses was. Let's look at this. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24. What does it say here? By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused. I love this. It means that he made a sharp decision. He refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So Moses makes a big decision. I'm going to go and I'm going to lead my Hebrew people. One problem. Ready for the one problem? Even though that might have been his destiny, he forgot to get God to lead him. He forgot to do it in God's timing. He forgot to do it God's way. He forgot to include God in this project. And so what we see here is that Moses, he goes out and he goes out to bring justice, to become a somebody. But there's a major problem, and here it is. And here's where I'm going to twist the story around for you today. Here's the major problem. Now pay attention to this. Moses had a dark side, a very dark side that he had not dealt with. And it brought a lot of pain. Here's what I want to do. Now we're going to flip this traditional story of Moses upside down. And I'm going to give you a new way to look at Moses' life. Okay, here it goes. Even before he was born, Moses understood, because they say babies can understand the environment around them, that he was growing up in a place of torment and pain and violence. They say that if you go up and poke a pregnant lady's belly, which I would suggest you don't without permission, but the baby will recoil. Why do you think fathers whisper and sing to the little baby in the mommy's belly? Because the baby recognizes it. The babies, they're aware of their surrounding environment. And Moses would have been aware from the very moment of his existence that he was being born into a violent culture, because they would have these soldiers that were planted outside the door of the Egyptian women, so that as soon as they gave birth, they killed the babies immediately. And now we see this wonderful, beautiful story of Moses being put in the Nile, and the Pharaoh's daughter takes him and puts him back with his family. He's raised by his family. He's educated by his family. He relates to the Hebrew people. And then when he's probably 4 or 5 or 6 years old, they take little Moses and they say, Moses, you can never see your family again. We all love you. It was great knowing you. Here, go live here the rest of your life. And then Moses at 5 or 6 years old had been like, oh my gosh, the sovereignty of God. Look, God must have great, great, great plans for my life. Does anybody here know a 5, 6-year-old? Do you think they would have got it? He would have felt devastated, abandoned. He would have felt like his parents didn't want him. He would have felt rejected. He would have felt like he had absolutely no control over his life. And as Moses grows up, we see that Moses has some horrifically deep, unresolved issues. Why? Because he has no control over his life. He's been abandoned. And let me tell you something. A lot of people who have dealt with abandonment, or they have dealt with situations where they don't have control over their life, guess what? They typically have severe anger issues. Does Moses have anger issues? Because let me tell you something right now. When we don't deal with our resolved issues, we don't deal with our unresolved issues, they finally will turn into sin. See, these unresolved issues that he had from abandonment and anger and feeling like he had no control over his life, it gave Satan a foothold in his life until that moment that he blew up in anger and killed a man. It had almost cost him everything. Here's this next fill-in today. I think all of us can have some unresolved issues, but I'm going to tell you right now, our unresolved issues will hinder us from the destiny God has called us to. If you don't deal with those pains from your childhood, if you don't deal with that rejection from that spouse, if you don't deal with that time you got fired from work, if you don't deal with that child who has said basically I don't want you a part of my life, if you don't deal with these issues of pain in your life, well then they will hinder you from fulfilling the destiny God has for you. Because what happens when we have these unresolved issues in our lives, they give Satan a foothold, and Satan will wait till that moment to spring us into sin. And let me show you what happened here. In one of the most insightful texts of all Scripture, we see the moment of failure unfold where sin took over Moses' life. And matter of fact, it wasn't when he killed the Egyptian. No, that was just the action. His moment of failure is right here. Check out this verse. It's amazing. It says, looking this way and that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. All right, pay attention here. He goes out and he tries to rescue his Hebrew brother. He's all of a sudden going to become their leader. He's going to make a name for himself. This is his coming out party. He's about to become the man. He's a famous general. He comes to the rescue of his Hebrew brother or sister, and all of a sudden he kills this Egyptian. But what does he do? He looks to the left. He looks to the right. What did Moses not do in this moment? Anyone? He looks this way and that way. He didn't look up. He didn't look to God for guidance. He didn't look to God to lead him. He didn't look to God for God to shape this conversation, to handle it a different way. In other words, he looked around and he decided, I'm so angry. This is not going the way I thought it was going to go. I thought whenever they saw me intervene, they were going to say, oh, Moses, you finally come to us from the palace. You're going to save us. Lead us, Moses. It didn't go that way, so he killed somebody. Because Satan had a foothold on his life and brought him into sin. And then guess what he did? He hid him in the sand. I think a lot of us hide our brokenness in the sand. I think a lot of us think that if we could just hide or bury our brokenness, that people won't see the messed up parts of our life. That people won't see our insecurities. People won't see the flaws in our life. And like Moses, he kills this man and then he buries him in sand like nobody's going to notice. And I think we do the same thing. I don't want people to know this flaw about me. I don't want people to know that I struggle with this. So I'm just going to hide my problems and I'm going to bury them in the sand. That way everybody will look at me and say, oh, you're all right. You're perfect. You're a somebody. And we try to live our lives this way, don't we? But let me tell you, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. He kills someone. And then check this out. It says the next day, verse 13, I love this. The next day he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your brother? I love this. I just killed somebody, but why are you punching somebody? But anyway, let's move on. All right, next. He says, the man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? And then Moses was afraid and thought, they know who I am. Translate that. They know who I really am now. They know who I really am. They've uncovered my personality. They know that I'm a man of anger. I'm a man that can't control my emotions. And basically, this is one of the greatest rejection moments of Moses' life. He goes to lead his people. He goes to become a hero and stop his brothers and sisters. Basically, he's saying, like, can we all just get along? Can we all just love each other? Let's all get together and let's have an exodus. Let's separate the waters. It's going to be awesome. And they look at him and said, we don't like the way you lead. You kill people. You have anger issues. Moses, you're kind of crazy. And Moses, you hit somebody's body in the sand and you didn't even think we were going to have a windstorm, and now that person's gross. They're sitting up there all uncovered now. You're crazy. And so Moses realizes, like, man, they figured out who I am. And so Moses fled. All right. His dream of becoming a somebody has become a nightmare. So what happens next? 3 words. Grace, grace, grace. Now let's look at the second season of Moses' life. Moses spent the next 40 years learning it's okay to be a regular body. Yeah, I made up that phrase. I don't like the word nobody, so I'm going to say regular body, okay? Let's look at this. It says, when Pharaoh heard of this, in other words, heard of Moses killing an Egyptian, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh, and then check this out. He went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. He sat down by a well to think. Now check out this map of Midian. Okay, you look at Egypt here, and then you look at Midian. That's pretty far away, right? He's out in the middle of nowhere. He is in exile. He's had an exodus before the real exodus. He went from the palace to a desert storm. And it's not good. It's not good. And let me tell you something. This is one of the craziest things you might ever hear put together. All right, he is in the middle of nowhere. He's in shepherd country. Who in here knows about Joseph? Joseph is the one that says Joseph in the coat of many collars, right? Joseph is the one who's actually responsible for bringing the Hebrew people into Egypt, but he only gave one instruction, one command. He said, all right, Hebrews, before we go live with the Egyptians, you got to know one rule, one thing. Don't blow it. Here it is, one rule. Do not let the Egyptians know you are shepherds. The Egyptians don't like shepherds. They consider them the lowest class of people, and they won't accept you. Keep that hidden. And now all of a sudden, Moses, in his exile, he goes from the palace to shepherd country. And now Moses has to basically learn how to become a Hebrew for 40 years. He has to go and embrace his roots. He has all the education of the world, but now God sends him to become a Hebrew, to become a real shepherd, because God is saying, I'm not going to let you shepherd my people until you learn to shepherd out here. I'm not going to let you, lead the people who are the Hebrews until you become one of them. And so, it reminds us a lot of times when we see our lives in a position where we've been hung out, where our life has been blown up, where things did not go the way that we thought our life was going to go, and everything's upside down. And we might look at God and say, where are you? What is going on? And God, let me tell you, when you're in his hands, and we're in those seasons where we're in shepherd country, here's what you need to know. God's doing his greatest work in your life during those seasons. God's shaping you. God's transforming you. God is doing a work that's going to come out on the other side. For 40 years, Moses thinks that he's just shepherding sheep. But what he's really doing is he's learning how to lead a nation in the millions. God is at work, even in the midst. And it's a beautiful thing. And here's the thing. In the midst of all this failure and loss, Moses just had to learn during those 40 years just how to be a human. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was shielded from everything. He just had to learn how to be a human. So let's talk real quick about the rules for being a human that Moses had to learn. Number 1, you're going to fail even if you're really good at something. That's just part of life. You're going to fail even if you're really good at something. I love this plaque. This plaque is on the 9th hole at a golf course, Rancho Park Golf Course in Los Angeles. And basically, it's a plaque that's talking about Arnold Palmer. He won 7 majors, 62 PGA tournaments. He was one of the original members of the Golfing Hall of Fame. And let me tell you what this plaque says. This is fascinating. It says, on Friday, January 6th, 1961, the first day of the 35th Los Angeles Open, Arnold Palmer, voted Golfer of the Year, Pro Athlete of the Year, took a 12 on this hole. And so they put a plaque up. Isn't that cool? Like, here's a plaque to your failure. But what it's trying to tell everybody is, it doesn't matter how good you are, sometimes you're going to blow it. It doesn't matter how much education you have or where you've grown up or what your life has been like. At a certain point, your life can fall apart. And point number 2 to being a human, it hurts. And it breaks my heart to watch many of you go through these seasons because it just hurts. There's no other way to say it. And the third part about becoming a human is simply this. Well, these experiences in the desert, they're either going to define us or they're going to refine us. And that's actually your choice. It's going to define you or refine you. You know, there's nothing quite as spectacular as a big public failure. You want to hear about one of mine? Here it goes. Pastor Tim and I, when we were at our old church about 8 or 9 years ago, we decided to launch a service that went on during the other hours of other services in the old chapel, and we called the service Vintage. We planned it for months. We launched it first week, 130 people. Great success. Tim and I are walking out like, we got it. Next week there was 100. Next week there was 75. Next week there was 45. Following week after that, there was 25 of our best friends and family members. And then we went on for months with just a few people in this room. And, you know, I felt stupid. Tim told me I was stupid. And finally, the church said, all right, you guys got to give this service up. So we gave the service up. But Tim and I really believed in this service, what this service could become. And so we learned a lot. We reshaped it a lot. And then that year at the Christmas services, at our campus, the Christmas services would go for a few days. And we would literally have thousands of people. And I got up, and here's my announcement that I made. I said, hey, do you remember that service that was probably the worst excuse for a church service you've ever seen in your life? It was really, really bad. Remember that? And it was so pathetic that we had to cancel it because nobody but my mom wanted to go to it. Do you remember that? Well, we're going to launch it again. And everybody just started dying laughing. And I said, but here's how it's going to be different. We launched that service again. Let me tell you, it's been 7 or 8 years. And that service is still going strong today, even though we're not there. You know, we're rebuilding our church right now. Whatever happened pre-2020, that's over. Almost every church in America, we're rebuilding. And we've got to start new here. We're rebuilding our church. You know what? In order to do that, we're going to have to throw some haymakers. And sometimes we're going to land. Sometimes we're going to miss. Let me tell you about one of our misses. I had this phenomenal idea at the beginning of summer to launch a mass service at 9 a.m. Did any of you go to that? Yeah, a couple, like one person. Listen, this service was so lowly attended that when I was on vacation, the staff canceled it without even talking to me. Do you realize how bad something has to be for a staff to cancel a church service without talking? Matter of fact, I even said, this might be the first time it's ever been done in the history of the church world where it was that bad. But also, we throw some haymakers that worked. We launched Thursday night service. 2 Thursday nights ago, we had over 90 adults in our Thursday night service. We've launched our online campuses. We're averaging about 350, 400 people online that are able to stay connected to our church. We just launched in January. It's called Church at Crossing Middle East. Within a month, I checked it this morning, we have 406 followers, all from the Middle East. Okay, so you could check it out, but please don't follow because we're trying to track who we're reaching because there's a huge amount of people over there who speak English but don't have a church to attend. And you look at these services, they'll have 40 or 50 hearts and all that, and I'll click on it and I can't read one of those names. And I praise God for them. I praise God for them. You know, and we're going to continue to go for it, and sometimes it's not going to go well. Right now, we're discerning launching a Spanish service. We got 2 guys from Philadelphia who are willing to move here. It might go great, it might not, but whatever, we're going to go for it. Maybe you started a small group and it crashed. Start another one. Maybe your Sunday school fell apart. Launch it again. Learn from it and go do it. It's okay to fail around here. Can everybody look at me? We are in a season where we have to go for it. It is okay to fail around here. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna have you all say it back to me, okay? Because I want you to know, because I want all of you going for it. And some things are gonna be great, some things are not gonna go great. But around here, we're gonna throw some haymakers. Okay, so I'm gonna say it, and then I want you to repeat it. It is okay to fail around here. Go.
It is okay
Yeah, but don't forget it hurts. It's not awesome, but it's okay. The last thing we learn from Moses' experience when he was over in this season is that, well, transformation happens in the presence of God. See, he spends these 40 years in the presence of God. And he chooses, and this is what I would encourage you, one of your other fill-ins today, choose to let failure refine you. Choose to let failure refine you, because that allows you to be truly transformed, and transformation only happens in time spent with God. See, Moses entered into the seminary of silence and brokenness. Now check this out, I love this. This passage is very fascinating. Verse 16, it says, now a priest of Midian has 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled troughs to water their father's flock. Now check this out, some shepherds came along and drove them away. Shepherds had a bad rep, guys, I'm telling you. But Moses got up, and he came to the rescue, and he watered their flock. This is a huge moment of transformation in his life. Moses has been out in exile. He's been hanging out with God, spending time with God, and now Moses is almost completely transformed. What do we see happen here? What's this big moment of victory? He didn't kill anybody. That's awesome. The last time he just killed somebody and buried him in the sand. This time he negotiates and the ladies get water. Growth, people, that's baby steps. Baby steps. Moses didn't kill someone. God's transforming his life. Not only is God transforming his life, but God's doing just a deep work. And let me tell you something about, this is a truth for every one of you, and there's no way around it. Transformation does not exist outside of a prayer life. If you are not regularly in the presence of God in worship or regularly connecting with God in prayer, I promise you this, there will be no transformation in your life. I know it's old school, but they have not discovered a new way to be transformed. If you want to experience transformation, it happens in the presence of God, no other place. So ask yourself, are you setting yourself up for transformation? Let me tell you what happened. This is so beautiful. In the midst of Moses' transformation and his time spent with God, he was able to go back over his life. And he was able to look back at his life and realize, why do I have these unresolved issues? Why do I have such anger issues? Why did I break the 10 Commandments one time? Why did I smack that rock when he's looking at his life and he has all these huge anger issues. But by spending time with God, he was able to go back and figure out what was going on in his life. And then we see the completion of this transformation. Moses has a son with Zipporah, one of the daughters of this Midian priest. And guess what he names his son? He names his son Gershom. Do you know what Gershom means? In Hebrew, it means alien in a foreign place. What has Moses felt like his whole life? An alien in a foreign place. He's supposed to be with his Hebrew family, but they put him around the Egyptians. And then he was supposed to go back to his Hebrew family, and now he has to go live in the desert. His whole life, he's felt like an alien. But after spending all this time alone with God and being in the presence of God, he starts to understand why he's so messed up, why there's so much turmoil. And guess what he does? He names it, he owns it, and then he uses it as a teaching lesson to everybody he ever meets. He says, I am going to name my son alien in a foreign land because that's my story. And I want everybody to know I'm okay with it at this point because God has his hand on my life. He names it and he owns it. And here's what you have to do. If you do not go back and look at your unresolved issues and name them and own them, you won't go past them. All right, let's close up today. Season 3. Moses spent the last 40 years of his life learning what God could do with somebody who knew he was a nobody or a regular body. I'm going to throw this point up here. It says Moses saw leadership, and here's what you need to know about Moses. He saw leadership as a tool to help others, not as a tool to help himself. Moses originally, when he stepped out to help the Hebrews, he was going to become a somebody, and he was going to make a name for himself. But now, let's look at the other side of his life. One of the most beautiful, amazing passages in the whole Bible. I read this and I just get chills all over my body. Exodus 32:30. The next day, Moses said to the people, you've committed a great sin. All right, here's what's going on. Moses left for a while, and while he was gone, the people built idols and went back to worshiping the idols of Egypt. This made Moses a little upset. But instead of taking a whip out and beating and killing all these people, he's grown. He says, but now I will go to the Lord, and perhaps I can make an atonement for your sin. So Moses went back to the Lord and said, oh, what a great sin these people have committed. Now check out this part. This is ridiculous. He says, they've made for themselves gods of gold, but now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written. All right, now let's break this down, because this is amazing. Moses spent the first 40 years of his life trying to learn how to become a somebody. He goes and he tries to become the leader of the Hebrew nation. He blows it. He kills somebody while he's trying to make a name for himself. After spending 40 years alone with God, he's so transformed that when they sin, he says, God, if you can't forgive them, I'll make a deal with you. Send me to hell, but let them live with you in eternity. Take my life, but spare them. Now pay attention to this. It's very fascinating. At the beginning, he wants to make a name for himself. But what does he say by the end of his life? Feel free to blot out my name. I'm okay with having no name. Remove my name from the book of life. That's transformation. And that's transformation that happens even in the midst of it looking like his whole life fell apart. But because he humbled himself and he got under the presence of God and he stuck with God and he walked with God, God was able to do a remarkable work in his life. And here's what I want to remind you today as we close out today. Even whenever he was in the Nile as a baby, he was in God's hands. When he was in the palace, he was in God's hands. When he killed that man and hit him in the sand, he was still in God's hands. Whenever he was hiding out in Midian, he was in God's hands. When he went before Pharaoh and said, let my people go, he was in God's hands. When he split the Red Sea, he was in God's hands. And even as an old man, setting up the nation of Israel, he was always in God's hands. No matter what season of life, no matter how great his moments of achievement was or failure, he was always in God's hands because he's always been God's child. And I don't know where you're at today. I don't know if you're in a moment of achievement, if you're in a moment of failure, if you're in a moment of life is going great and you're fulfilling your destiny, or if you're in a moment where, you know what, your unresolved issues from your life keep dragging you down, keep causing you to fight, keep causing you to lose jobs, keep causing your marriage to blow up. I don't know where you're at, but let me tell you something, because you're his child, wherever you are at, you are in his hands because you are redeemed, you've been saved, you are his child, he loves you, and he has a plan for you wherever you are at. In your brokenness today, you don't have to hide it in the sand around here, okay? We love you, and we want to help you. And it's okay to fail around here, and it's okay to be ourselves around here. We're God's children. Can I pray for you? God, we love you. We thank you for the lessons we can learn from Moses' life. God, Moses' life is all over the place. He really blew it. And then you really redeemed it. And some of us, we've blown it, but some of us, our life has crashed because of circumstances we had nothing to do with. Life just blew our life up. But God, I also know you can redeem these situations because you said that you are near the brokenhearted and that your mercies are new every day. So God, I pray your blessing over your people. I pray your hand be upon every person in this room. The person who is broken today, God, touch their heart, love on them, remind them that they are your child. The person today who is just lost in a desert, lead them and guide them. That person who's been coming to church for years, but, well, there's no transformation in her life. God, help them to finally bow their knee down and decide to live their life in your presence so you can transform them. God, we are your people, and we love you.